Good Monday afternoon. I'm Andy Lee, and we're going to have 3 quotes and 2 articles on Congressman Eric Swalwell, and maybe even John Ossoff is included in this. So, just hold up. So the first quote is by Winston Hugh Auden. He is an English-born American poet. And the quote that we are going to do is from September 1st, 1939. There is no such thing as the state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice. To the citizen or the police, we must love one another or die. The other one is by St. Augustine, 354 to 430. Numidian-born Christian convert, Bishop of Hippo. We are ensnared by the wisdom of the serpent. We are set free by the foolishness of God. And the other one is by Sir Francis Bacon. Liberty of speech inviteth and provoketh, liberty to be used again, and so bringeth much to a man's knowledge. That knowledge may not be as courtesan for pleasure and vanity only, or as a bondswoman, to acquire and gain to her master's use, but as a spouse, for generation, fruit, and comfort. It's a beautiful thing. Alright, let's get into the articles here. I hope everybody's having a great holiday season, and I hope you guys get into the next year nice and strong and healthy. We'll talk about vaccinations soon. Here is from NPR. It's FBI briefs Pelosi and McCarthy on Representative Swalwell's ties to suspected Chinese spy. This is from December 18th, 2020. Leaders in the U.S. House of Representatives received an FBI briefing regarding Representative Eric Swalwell's ties to a suspected Chinese spy, as a report of his association with the woman prompted Republicans to call for the California Democrats' removal from his position on the House Intelligence Committee. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat from California, and Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, a Republican from California, were briefed on Friday. McCarthy has said he requested the meeting. Speaking to reporters after the meeting, McCarthy said the briefing only raised more questions. The one thing that was fundamentally answered, he should not be on Intel. McCarthy is one of several prominent Republicans to call for removal of Swalwell from the high-powered committee, following a report from Axios that Swalwell and other California politicians had for years been targeted for information by a suspected Chinese spy. Axios reports that the U.S. officials do not believe that Swalwell or others gave the woman classified information. Top House leaders, Pelosi and McCarthy, decide which lawmakers get appointed to the Intelligence Committee. So, Pelosi does need to answer why she put this rookie and unexperienced guy on such a high-profile thing. It's just basic questions, Pelosi. Come on, you should be able to answer that. Calling China an adversary in many shapes and many forms, McCarthy said, "There are definitely 200 other Democrats that I know could fill that place long before this individual should be serving." He did not elaborate beyond that. A spokeswoman for Swalwell's office did not return a request for comment regarding the FBI's briefing and McCarthy's remarks. The FBI declined to comment as well. Pelosi did not comment after Friday's meeting. Asked about the matter last week, she said that the leadership of the House and the Intelligence Committee were informed in 2015 that overtures from a Chinese person were being made to members of Congress, but that communications ended once they were aware. Oh, well, now that everybody knows and then they cut ties, it's all good though, right? It's all good now? Everything's cool? You don't have to tell the people that you're representing and everything else, and you don't have to do that? Sounds good. I don't have any concern about Mr. Swalwell, Pelosi said. In an interview with CNN earlier this week, Swalwell said he was shocked to learn of the individual's ties back then. Just over 6 years ago, I was told about this individual, and then I offered to help, and I did help. I was thanked by the FBI for my help, he said. I was a little surprised to read about my cooperation in that Axios story because the story says that there was never a suspicion of wrongdoing on my part and all I did was cooperate. Swalwell pointed to his work on President Trump's impeachment as a possible motive for the leaked information. That's just deflection. I'm in the hot seat and I don't like it, so let me get out of here. That's what that is. If this is a country where people who criticize the president are going to have a law enforcement information weaponized against them, that's not a country that any of us want to live in, and I hope it is investigated as to who leaked this information, he told the network, almost like AOC's, let's have a Trump accountable thing, where they're like, you know what I mean? That's... Since the news broke earlier last week, Republicans have sharply criticized Swalwell for having allegedly fallen victim to a spy operation, and some have gone so far as to call for his resignation from Congress, which probably should happen. In a White House briefing earlier this week, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany said about Swalwell, after entangling with this spy for years, Swalwell hypocritically went on to be one of the lead investigators of the Russia collusion hoax and the impeachment sham. And that is the rest of that article from NPR. Here is Asaf's Chinese. This is the Washington Times, by the way. Asaf's China ties compound Democratic parties. Hunter Biden Swalwell woes. Georgia Senate candidates face criticism over financial disclosure delay. Democratic Senate candidate John Ossoff is fighting Republican attacks over his business ties to China as the Georgia runoff nears. But the Hunter Biden and Eric Swalwell scandal involving Beijing aren't making it any easier. Mr. Biden, the president-elect's son, and California Democratic Representative Swalwell have kept stories about Beijing's influence in the news, leading oxygen to the Republicans hammering Mr. Ossoff, linked to a Hong Kong conglomerate owned in part by the Chinese Communist government. Mr. Ossoff, a Democrat challenging Republican Senator David Perdue in the January 5th runoff, slipped a few points in the December 18th poll by the Trafalgar Group, which pollster Robert Kelly attributed it primarily to the China issue. The movement, from what we can see, is more of the Ossoff-Perdue race, Mr. Kelly told Fox News. The voters are telling us that the movement is about the China thing. I think the attacks on Ossoff about his connection to China are working for Perdue. For Mr. Ossoff, the timing could hardly be worse. Alarm over Chinese influence soared starting in mid-October with new reports of Hunter Biden's lucrative business deals with Beijing, followed by an Axios investigation earlier this month into a suspected Chinese spy who became chummy with some California Democrats, including Mr. Swalwell. The Perdue campaign connected the dots in a digital ad with news clips of critics, including Senator Marsha Blackburn, Tennessee Republican, raising concerns about Mr. Ossoff's company receiving payments from PCCW Media, which is owned in part by China Unicom, a state-run telecommunications provider. Oh, that's all that we want to give you for that article? Oh, never mind. Need to click. And the ad, John Ossoff has a China problem, ends with a photo of Mr. Swalwell posing with Christine Fang, the suspected Chinese operative who's also known as Fang Fang. Ossoff had to amend his financial dealings, says Fox News host Dana Perino in a news clip in the ad released December 16th. I've got to tell you, America has been giving a wake-up call in this Swalwell thing. Now, who do they target? Young, up-and-coming progressive people. If I were in Georgia, I'd take a look. The race is skin tight, but Mr. Ossoff has trended in the wrong direction. The latest Trafalgar poll showed Mr. Perdue ahead with committed and leaning votes by 52.2% to 47.5% for Mr. Ossoff, even though the Democrat led in December 11th poll by 49.1% to 48.8%. The China issue erupted in September after National Review report that Mr. Ossoff amended his May 15th financial disclosure report in July to reflect that his London-based investigative film company Insight TWI received funding from PCCW. China owns an 18% share of PCCW. The Georgia Republican Party filed an ethics complaint on December 8th, accusing the Democrat of trying to hide his PCCW connection before the June 9th primary, which the Ossoff campaign dismissed as a laughable smear campaign. The Ossoff campaign, which added payments from a total of 32 groups to its May 15 filing, attributed the revisions to the paperwork oversight that was discovered after a normal review of the campaign's paperwork, according to factcheck.org. The campaign also pushed back on a Senate Leadership Fund ad last month that said Mr. Ossoff was hiding cash from Chinese communists, with an Ossoff spokesperson saying that the payments came from royalties from the airing of 2 Insight TWI documentaries, and that PCCW does not equal Chinese communist. Even so, Mr. Ossoff has been dogged by the issue. Hecklers waved Chinese flags last month at an Ossoff rally. The Purdue campaign released 30-second spot Monday showing a red map of China and Chinese troops juxtaposed with photos of Mr. Ossoff. We know Ossoff was paid by the communist Chinese government through a media company, says the 30-second ad. He tried hiding it. It got caught. Then lied. Why did China really pay Ossoff? What's he hiding? The issue was the subject of debate Monday on the Georgia Gang, the state's longest-running public affairs program. Democratic strategist Theron Johnson called the attacks on Mr. Ossoff totally false, citing an unnamed media fact check. While it's fair for Senator Perdue to make that claim, I think its only difference is you've got to back it up with evidence, especially when it's been really thoroughly vetted by false, said Mr. Johnson on the Fox 5 Atlanta show. The Ossoff campaign said in a statement to National Review that the candidates strongly support Hong Kong pro-democracy movement and condemns the brutality and authoritarianism of Chinese Communist Party. That wasn't strong enough, said Phil Kent, CEO and publisher of Insider Advantage, an online publication focused on Georgia's business and politics. If you want to convince us, Mr. Ossoff condemned the Communist Chinese government for their infiltration in America, for their horrible human rights record, their crushing of independence in Hong Kong, Mr. Kent said. Even Joe Biden has to be very careful with all of this controversy about China. So Ossoff better renounce China and any ties now. Oh my God. Jeez. The Senate ethics from form requires candidates to disclose any income over $5,000. But the campaign told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that Mr. Ossoff's company received about $1,000 from PCCW, which means it did not need to be reported. Why disclose it? The Ossoff camp said it did so in the interest of transparency, according to the newspaper, but now they won't answer any questions in the name of transparency. Why disclose it? The Ossoff camp said it did its own transparency, according to the newspaper, although critics say there has been little in the way of openness on the issue. Back in May, just before the Democratic Party, John Ossoff hid the fact that he received all this money for his media campaign from the Chinese Communist government, and he said it was a mistake and an oversight. Sorry, my bad, gee Louise. Got my bag, said Mr. Kent. Well, come on. What a joke that was. Like, duh. It's not even a good excuse. The Ossoff campaign cited the AGC article, which ran on December 9th after being contacted for comment by the Washington Times. The runoff election also features a race between Senator Republican Kelly Loeffler and Democrat Raphael Warnock. The outcome of the two races will determine the control of the Senate. And that's when you heard Chucky Schumer say, we take control of Georgia, we change the world, or America, or, you know what I mean? So, these are vital, you know. None of this is stuff is over. We're still fighting the good fight, folks. Let your heart not be troubled, you know. We will prevail. All right? It's just a fact. And then we'll read one from a very highly astute and acclaimed journalist, Byron York. Does really good work. Byron York, the Democrats' Eric Swalwell problem. House Democrat leaders are trying to keep the espionage scandal surrounding Intelligence Committee Representative Eric Swalwell under tight control, but it's going to be an uphill battle. Republicans are pushing harder and harder to learn more about Swalwell's relationship with Chinese spy Christine Fang and the Democrats' strongest ally, the New York Times, which has averted its eyes and so far refused to publish even one word about the matter. Can't hold out forever. Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is demanding the FBI brief all members of the Intelligence Committee on what the Bureau knows about the relationship between Swalwell and Fang Fang. That relationship began sometime after Fang arrived in the U.S. in 2011. Before Swalwell was elected to Congress and continued through 2015, by which time Swalwell had won the election to the House and the Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, picked him for a coveted spot on the Intelligence Committee. How much does Pelosi know, and when does she know it? We need to know these things. U.S. authorities had Fang under surveillance and apparently picked up information about her having some sort of personal relationship with a member of Congress, Swalwell. In 2015, the FBI met with Swalwell, again, a member of the Intelligence Committee, to inform him that Fang was a spy. Swalwell says he immediately cut off all contact with Fang, who quickly left the U.S. in mid-2015. I bet you he said, hey, honeypot, they know about you. You gotta bounce back to Chinatown. Now, not the other Chinatown, but the real Chinatown. I bet you that's what he did. We need to know. Hook him up. Come on, more Republicans used to have people on those little, right? On those little lie detector. And the lie detector test says we need to have that right now. In the next year, 2016, Swalwell started accusing the Trump campaign of collusion with Russia. He proposed a 9/11-style commission to investigate the alleged influence of Russian spy agencies and the then candidate Donald Trump and top members of his campaign. And now, you know what? Now we got to do it is table is turned, and then give these people a little taste of their own little medicine and see how they like it. I mean, probably won't. And then that's how people know not to do things like that again. No one in the public knew it at the time, but Swalwell had just recently had some sort of involvement with the spy himself. One of the FBI had actually warned him about, and they didn't do the same for Donald Trump about any of those things. They gave, even Feinstein had a Chinese spy as a driver for 20 years and nobody knew, right? Come on. They are in bed for a very long time. We need to know these things. Get them out. We need, AOC's right. We need new leadership. That's another quote. Freebie. As 2016 and 2017 went on, Swalwell became one of the leading voices attacking President Trump and his Republican defenders of the debunked Russia issue. Now Republicans look back on those days and are amazed. This computer is going a little move. Now Republicans, it's this ad thing right here, it keeps going up, it's funny. Now Republicans look back on those days and are amazed that Swalwell would play the role of attack dog when he himself had been in close contact with a foreign spy. Democrats spent 4 years accusing Republicans of cozying up to foreign spies when the Democrats themselves were doing that. Republican Representative Devin Nunes, the ranking Republican on the Intelligence Committee, in a statement. Now my Republican colleagues are asking me if there are any Democrat P-tapes and if they're being blackmailed with naked pictures of their party leaders. Maybe all of their Democrats' accusations stem from what's really happening to them. That's called a mirror effect or projection. There's a lot of history in that statement. The P-tape remark is a reference to the Steele dossier, which among other false accusations spread the story that private citizen Donald Trump had watched as prostitutes performed a kinky sex act in a Moscow hotel room in 2013 as Russian intelligence services filmed the entire episode. Swalwell was enormously interested and perhaps obsessed with the P-tape. In November 2017, when the Intelligence Committee interviewed Keith Schiller, a bodyguard who accompanied Trump to Moscow, Swalwell asked question after question after question about the hotel room story. He never got anywhere because there was no story to tell. Hey, Bobosh. Yeah, you. Good boy. For the GOP, the important thing right now is to learn exactly what the FBI knows about the case. Last week, McCarthy received an FBI briefing on the matter. The FBI had actually concealed the briefing twice before finally canceled, I meant. But the briefing was just for McCarthy and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who were the only two members in the room. The information was classified, and both were forbidden from discussing what was said, which helps Pelosi keep a lid on the matter. But McCarthy made no secret on his belief that the Swalwell case is a very big deal, and it shouldn't be swept under the rug. That's my little interjection. One thing that was fundamentally answered, he should not be on Intel, McCarthy said, before I read that. In an interview with Fox News' Martha McCallum, McCarthy said, I can't tell you about that, what was in the briefing, but I can tell you this. What I learned today, and anyone who was in that room with me would never allow Swalwell to be on the Intel Committee or to continue to be on it. If any leaders knew about the Swalwell information earlier, McCarthy said he should not be serving. That was a direct shot at Pelosi, who had picked the ambitious young congressman for the committee. The next step for Republicans is to get the FBI to brief all members of the Intelligence Committee. If members, including members of Pelosi's party, learn of the facts of the case, there will be an increasing pressure for Pelosi to do something about it, McCarthy said on the Hill. Thinks both Republicans and Democrats would agree if the information contained in the briefing would lead folks to conclude that Swalwell should not be on the committee. It's unclear what the FBI briefing will concur. Perhaps Pelosi will try to block it. Perhaps you can delay things for a while, but with the diminished majority next year, the speaker will have other fights to fight. At some point, Eric Swalwell's story will come out. All right? So that's what we got right there. Tomorrow we'll probably talk about vaccines, and because they are doing 1 million of those, and there's a couple, they say like maybe a couple of people have allergic reactions, but not that bad. So no one's died or anything from it, I don't think. All right, so you guys have a good one. Love you guys. You guys have a good Happy New Year, and remember, be kind and spread love everywhere.